Good morning, Dan. And Amy is out of commission today. She's feeling a little under the weather, so we'll hopefully have her back tomorrow. College campus watch time. This time we're going to Strange Brew Land, the Mackenzie brothers, the Great White North, Canada, Hamilton, Ontario, to be specific. That's the residence of McMaster University. And Jordan Peterson is a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto. He was to give a speech at McMaster University about legislation that is pending in Canada that would mandate individuals use the preferred pronouns of gender for non-binary people or be faced with prosecution, as in criminal prosecution. A new law in the country criminalizing offensive speech on the basis of gender identity. Criminalizing offensive speech. You think that can only happen in Canada? Not so sure about that. What happened with Jordan Peterson's effort to address the students at McMaster University is certainly something that we're familiar with in the United States, whether it's a provocateur like Milo Yiannopoulos or an eminent sociologist like Charles Murray. Anybody who is not compliant with the orthodoxy on campus gets the same treatment. Listen to how students greeted Professor Peterson when he entered the classroom in which he was to speak at McMaster University. So the cowbells and the drum circle and the chanting transphobic piece of, because Professor Peterson doesn't think speech that some find offensive should be criminalized. He's taken that radical position. 312-642-5600, turnkey.pro answer line, 64636DA, turnkey.pro text line. Be interested particularly to hear from people with kids in college or en route to college in the not-too-distant future about how they're thinking about higher education in this country 30 years after Alan Bloom wrote Closing of the American Mind, and it has, in certain circles, been shut incredibly tight, airtight, waterproof over the last 30 years. Here is McMaster at McMaster University. Some students wanted Jordan Peterson to speak, wanted to hear his case. So you do have, there's hope. There are young people on college campuses that are actually interested in hearing the arguments from both sides and coming to their own formulations. So some chanted let him speak in response to those that were trying to shout Professor Peterson down. And they were offered this return fire. Let him speak! Let him speak! Let him speak! Let him speak! Yeah, they let him speak to try and quiet down the protesters trying to shut down the event, was greeted with F you, because that's the quality of the argument, I guess, on the other side. This is Professor Peterson just sitting in a chair. I mean, he's like this kind of very relaxed, understated academic, right? He is not the provocateur. He didn't come in on a throne carried by students like Milo would do. He's just sitting there watching this chaos unfold in front of him. Listen to, I don't know if you can make this out, but I'll tell you what he says.
And you look around and you see people who come to university to learn, and they're being taught that this is actually the way that you...
No speech for Jordan Peterson.
Your political
Jordan Peterson is a known transphobe with a history of denying the fundamental humanity of trans and non-binary people.
It's difficult to hear, of course, because he's being shouted down, but he basically just says, this is incredible that people think that this is how you engage in conversation. He goes on to say, this is incomprehensible to me. What he is witnessing is incomprehensible to him. He says it, and you can see the expression on his face. He's saddened by what he is witnessing because of the intolerance of those who oppose his viewpoint on Bill C-16, the criminalization of offensive speech in Canada. It's really quite something. And here's the thing. Here's what we know to be true. And this was summed up nicely in an op-ed by Crispin Sartwell in the Wall Street Journal. Crispin Sartwell is an associate professor of philosophy at Dickinson College. He's had his own run-ins with the orthodoxy on that college's campus. But he talks about what's happening on college campuses. And he writes that words have such power. The left's position is that you can essentially improve life through redefining vocabulary. That's essentially what they're doing. He writes, the belief words have such power suggests we can create a better world by re-narrating. But it also implies that we need to get control of what people say and write and hear and read. Yeah, see that connection? If you think that redefining words or using particular words, so, I'm no longer a man or a woman based on the vocabulary we use about gender. If you can just change the description and you create the world, words are used to create an alternate universe rather than describe the world in which we live. The difference between those two approaches. If you can do that, then where does it lead you? It leads you to this conclusion that Sartwell draws. We need to get control of what people say, write, hear, and read. Thus, Canada criminalizing quote-unquote offensive speech. He goes on to say that truth is, for the left, the leftist postmodernists, truth is nothing but a story we will all come to accept together. A progressive story in which inequalities of race and sex and sexuality are being steadily ameliorated. He cites one of the leading figures of postmodernism on campus, Richard Rorty. Rorty's opinion about intellectuals on campus. It's doubtful whether the current critics of the universities who are called conservative intellectuals deserve this description. This is Rorty. For intellectuals are supposed to be aware of and to speak to issues of social justice. So Sartwell explains that, saying essentially, look, what he's saying is opponents of the leftist consensus in academia don't count as intellectuals because of the position they take. So that by that logic, it's defensible to eliminate such people from graduate programs, to deny them tenure, even to shout them down, as you saw happen with Professor Peterson on the campus of McMaster University in Ontario. It's all justified, as is all the other implications of saying things that are offensive to some. If you can change the world through vocabulary, you need to get control of what people say, write, hear, and read. This is the closing of the American mind and the opening up of Orwell's 1984. And again, you don't think this can happen in the United States? Not just on college campuses, but I mean, we're talking about Canada instituting this as law, not just on the in the safe spaces. Our friend David French over at National Review has a good piece, An Army of Strawmen Keeps Campus Intolerance Alive, talking about the number of universities in this country that have thrown Christian groups off campus or attempted to. More than 100 universities in the United States have either thrown Christian groups off campus or attempted to toss groups from campus on the grounds that it is impermissible discrimination for Christian groups to reserve leadership positions in their Christian group for Christians. You following this? In the name of protecting students from the Ku Klux Klan, this is an example at Vanderbilt University, the university ejected from campus student groups known mainly for playing lots of guitar, volunteering disproportionately at urban homeless shelters, and avoiding the binge-drinking hookup culture that was and is causing its own set of campus problems. The Vanderbilt University, the administrators there compared Christians, students seeking Christian leadership, to segregationists from the Jim Crow South. When you redefine the vocabulary, you get to tell, well, you don't get to, but the next step is to attempt to control what people think, see, read, hear. And that's exactly what's already happening on college campuses in this country. It just hasn't been codified into law nationally like it is in Canada.